In this video, we're going to go over the scientific method along with a little practice. So as a reminder, what is the scientific method? This is going to be a method we use to find out information through measurement and experimentation. We're going to use this method to prove the reasons why we think things happen. It's all going to start with an observation. This is something that we will see out and about in our lives. For example, we might see that when a young child eats a sugary cereal, they become very energetic. We could use the scientific method to try to explain why this is the case. The way this would work is we'd create something called an if, then, because statement. This is also called a hypothesis, and each part means something different. We might say that if a child eats more sugar, then they will have more energy because sugar crystals create energy in our stomachs. And we really need all three parts of this. Let's break it down into each part. We might say, as a scientist, if we want to test this, we'll first look at that statement, that if statement. For example, if a child eats more sugar, this is going to be our independent variable. This is the thing that as a scientist, we could change. It's what we would change in our experiment. We might change the amount of sugar that child eats. That would be the first thing we need to decide to prove our observation, our hypothesis is true. We would change the number or the amount of sugar the child would eat. The next part, then they will have more energy. This is the thing we are measuring. We're changing the amount of sugar, the independent variable, and we're measuring the amount of energy. That thing that we're measuring, we call our dependent variable. And that's because that amount of energy depends on the amount of sugar that we eat. And the last piece, the because statement, because sugar crystals create energy in our stomachs, this is the why. This is why we believe this is true. We are trying to kind of prove this out, and this might be the first experiment we use to prove that because statement. It's always important to have a reason why you see something happening. You want to try to explain why it is true. So let's do a little bit of practice. But first, let's talk about some other variables. Other things that would affect how energetic the child is, how much they slept, what age they are, what time of year it is, or if they already ran around the room a lot. All of these things would affect the child's energy, but it's not the amount of sugar. Those other variables, the other things that affect their energy, we call those controls. They affect the overall result, how energetic the child is, but they're not the thing that we are measuring in our experiment. We're measuring sugar. We're seeing, does sugar affect energy? So we want to make sure we keep these variables the same, otherwise they would affect our results. Do a little bit of practice. Let's say that I notice when the temperature gets colder, I shiver more. You might have noticed this recently. I might say as a hypothesis, if the temperature decreases, then I will shiver more often because my body shivers to make itself warmer. As a scientist, if I want to test this, I first need to figure out what is my independent variable? What is the thing I would change? In this experiment, I can change or at least do the tests when there's a different outside temperature. So we're really changing that temperature. What is the dependent variable? What would I measure when the temperature changes? In this experiment, I would measure how often I shiver. I want to see, as the temperature changes, does how much I shiver change as a result? What is at least one thing you would need to control? Consider this. If I don't control clothing, I might shiver more or less if I don't control clothing. If I'm wearing a t-shirt, I'll probably shiver more than if I'm wearing a coat. So I want to make sure I have the same clothing on for each test. Otherwise, we're not sure if the temperature difference makes me shiver more or if my different clothing is making me shiver more. Let's try one more. Let's say I notice that when I chew gum, I focus better on what I'm doing. And I'm specifically going to think about this in school. If I chew more gum, then I will complete more assignments because gum helps my mind stay focused. This is something that I might want to try to prove or at least run an experiment on. What would my independent variable be here? What is the thing I would change throughout my experiment? In this case, I can change how much gum I'm chewing. We could run different experiments where we change something else, but notice that in my hypothesis, I'm saying if I chew more gum. So I'm specifically changing how much gum I'm chewing. What is the dependent variable? What is the thing that I would be measuring? In this experiment, I would measure how many assignments I complete, and this would give me an idea of how focused I am. Notice that my then statement tells me how many assignments I complete. That's what I'm measuring to see if more gum helps me complete more assignments. And what is one control here? One control might be which class I'm in. Maybe I complete more assignments in different classes simply because I am maybe better at different classes than others. So maybe I'll complete more in math class, regardless of how much gum I chew, because I simply like math more. I hope this video helped you understand the scientific method and how it relates to hypotheses a little more.